It's live. Hello. I think there are people here. I'm going to wait till my moderator emails me. Okay, I'm seeing some questions. So I'm going to start here. First, I'll tell you who I am. My name is Dawn. I'm the owner of Red Sofa Literary. I've been an agent since 2002. I opened Red Sofa in 2008. We're on our 11th year of being around. So that's a little bit about us, a little bit about me. I have a pretty deep background in book selling as well. That's helped me get through grad school. And in grad school, I focused heavily on library information sciences, my master's background, and children's lit. So I've been in all corners of the room when it comes to books and kids stuff. So I'm going to see the first question here. I'm just going to read it out loud, or maybe you guys can see it. But this person asked, they self-published a trilogy, and it looks like it was a while back, and they're wondering if it will negatively impact their chances of getting traditionally published. And how to approach that. So with self-publishing, it's not a bad thing. Obviously, if you publish your book and you're putting yourself out there, obviously that is part of being self-published, is constantly promoting yourself. If you are not promoting your book and then you're wanting to get traditionally published, it's going to be a little bit harder to get traditionally published because obviously you just don't have as large of a buzz around your name, or your star is not as bright because we don't know who you are. There are quite a few self-published authors over the years who transitioned from self-publishing to traditional, and they basically did it the right way. And this sounds like you're doing the same thing. You self-publish your first 3 books, your trilogy. Now you are looking to take it up a notch and go traditional, and you're taking a new idea out. So part of it is just like any other author, you got to have a platform in the sense that you have an audience. You need to be able to write well. It needs to be a good idea. And obviously, you need to continue to promote your self-published book while you're doing that. And obviously, as long as it's a new idea, you should be in pretty good solid footing. That shouldn't be too big of a deal. So that's, in this day and age, we call it hybrid publishing. And that means some of your books you might do on your own, and some of them you might do traditionally. And as long as you're strategic about it, you should be fine. So I think we're going to stop with that, but that's a good question to start with. Okay, second question. I was wondering what sales numbers in the first few weeks and then in the first quarter of a book's release are considered good book sales for traditional publishing. What book sales are considered a true success for a debut in traditional publishing? So I'm one of those agents in the world who I am bridged between what I call the old school agent, because I started in 2002. And then you got your traditional agent who maybe has been started agenting less than 10 years ago. I actually, in the old days, if you didn't sell more than 10,000 books, that wasn't good. It's changed a lot, just like authors' advances. The industry is different. We have things like Amazon kind of monopolizing our lives. It's different now. So really, to be quite honest, most print runs are anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 books with a traditional publisher, unless your name is really big, and then they're going to do a lot more than that. So 25,000 copies, because they're anticipating maybe, like, if you're like the next James Patterson, or you are James Patterson, there's going to be 25 to 50,000 copies printed. You can kind of see who that happens with when it's a large quantity, because you go to Barnes & Noble, you'll see those half-price books all over the place. It's usually all the mystery authors for some reason, because you'll probably remember at some point they were on the front tables, and there's a whole reason behind why they were on those tables. But at the same time, they were sold at a deep discount after they weren't as popular. So 10,000 copies is pretty good. You can brag about that. If you sell through your first print run traditionally, and that's 3,000 to 5,000, that's something you can be pretty happy with. That's good. But the other thing too you have to think about is returns. So publishers will say, hey, you sold X number of copies when they give you a royalty statement, but they'll also say, we received so many copies back, and they're going to put that negative number for returns against your positive number for sales. And so you want to obviously, you want to hope that people are going to keep your book versus buy it and then return it. Once again, that's a whole different conversation about the state of publishing with returns. But yeah, 3,000 to 5,000 copies. I can't really tell you by the week, but one of my authors has over 200,000 followers on Instagram. And she was aiming to sell at least 3,000 copies, I think, pre-sale, but she started at least 6 months ahead of time doing that. One of our other authors who does women's romance, she has a lot of pre-sale campaigns going on. So that's something where people can pre-order it, and then all those books are released on the day of release, and that goes against showing all those books sold in that one day or that 1 week. So, but it's more, I'm honestly more concerned about your longevity. How long will that book go? Will people buy a lot of it? So that's a big thing. Hopefully this is answering some questions here. Question 3, what do you think was the true key to success for self-published authors like Hugh Howey versus the many who are struggling in self-publishing? Now, I don't know who Hugh Howey is. I might have to look that up. But there's a lot of other people along the way who have done okay. I think the true success was they wrote a book that people connected with. Every reader's going to respond differently to a book. And if you are a writer, you should know your readers. If you do not know your readers and you're writing a book that only you would like, but maybe they will not like, it's maybe will not go as far. It's really important to find a happy balance of writing a good book with a good story that readers will connect with. A great example, even though it's not self-published, is Harry Potter. There are still some people in this world who hate it. They do exist, but the majority of people love it. And I think the reason being is because people connect it with the characters or the story or that world or all of the above. And so that's why it went bonko popular. If you are going to self-publish a book, you need to put the same amount of time and energy into the writing and editing and preparation and production value of that book as you would if it was traditionally published. So I don't know who Hugh Howey is, but maybe he took the time to think about putting that time and the money and really thinking about all those little tiny minutia along the way to make it a good book. You know, the thing is as I say here locally, I live in the Twin Cities. I shop locally a lot. And I always say if I buy local, the money stays in the community. And the big thing is that people can vote with their dollars. So if they like a book, whether it's traditionally or self-published, they're voting with their dollars. And so really taking the time to really think about every little step along the way if you're self-publishing it usually means that you're going to have a better response than if you just rushed it out the door. And so one thing worth noting is like, if I sell a book to a publisher, it's going to take anywhere from 1.5 years to 2 years to come out. That has a lot of people get involved over that process. You have production, marketing, you're dealing with the social media people, you're dealing with the editing. There's a lot going on. The sales reps are getting involved. That's 1.5 to 2 years. If you self-publish it, you need to budget 1.5 to 2 years since it might be just you doing that. You may not be hiring a third party to help you with these things. So really think about the steps. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Question 4. When we see a headline like so-and-so author has received a 7-figure book deal or a 6-figure book deal, what is the reality of how much the author is really being paid when they are really receiving that payment in traditional publishing? Well, they are getting the money. But what it is it's going to be split up. So we'll use a scenario. Let's say that I sell your book for $50,000. This is your debut novel. It's a good day in publishing if you get a $50,000 book deal. Most people might start anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 on their first book deal, sometimes lower, sometimes higher. Once again, it depends on the book, the editor, just the excitement around that book. You can never really predict what's going to happen, but we're just going to go with 50,000. That's what you've been offered. You're getting $50,000 book deal. What's going to happen is you will get a certain percentage when you sign the contract, which would hopefully be negotiated by an agent. You would get a certain percentage after you turn in your manuscript. Some places will pay you a certain percentage when it's an acceptable version of the manuscript. So you turned it in, but now that's the delivery, but now it's accepted. They've accepted the manuscript. So that's called the acceptance. So there's sometimes delivery and acceptance are bundled. So yeah, deliveries, I turned it in. Acceptance means my editor told me it's in good shape. It is ready to, to go to the production team to format the book. And then there's the publication. So sometimes places will just cut to the chase and not even worry about a payment on publication. They'll just pay when you sign the contract, and they'll pay you when the manuscript is accepted. An agent can argue or banter with them very quietly about what those percentages are. So for example, I've seen publishers will say, we'll pay 25% upon signing the contract. So it's 25% of that 50,000, 25% on the delivery and acceptance of the manuscript, and 50% when the book comes out. And then I'll do the math and be like, wait a minute, my author's going to have to wait 2 years, potentially, or a year and a half for the full advance. So at that point, I'm going to push it and say, I want half up. I want them to pay 50% when we sign the contract, 25% when we deliver it. And if I can't get the final portion at acceptance of the manuscript, then obviously that 25% that's remaining would come out at publication. So that is kind of what to anticipate. As someone who has had authors with book deals, if you do not pay your taxes ahead of time, sometimes just put that money aside, put approximately 20% in a savings account and don't touch it. Or you will have a big old panic attack later on. Those folks with those $1 million book deals, they're rare. They're kind of like seeing a unicorn. You should understand that they're probably working with not only their agent, they probably are going to be working with some other folks in the managing of that money, but yeah, they're getting the money. They may not get it all at one time, but they will get the money. Hopefully that answered your question. You mentioned pre-sale of books. Is that something an author agent negotiating a book contract with a traditional publisher? It's not in a contract, but basically when you talk to your marketing team and your publicity people at your publishing house, this is if you're going traditional, they can set up a lot of campaigns and encourage people to order the books. So Amazon is an entity a lot of people use for that. But you can also encourage people to order from Barnes & Noble ahead of time. This is once again talking to your publisher. If you shop at your local bookstore, because I have the benefit of being in a city with a lot of local bookstores, and I am roping Barnes & Noble into that because I want them to make it, then basically, you can encourage people to, basically go to the bookstore. If your book is in the system, then they can pre-order it. And that way, when it's time for the book to come out, it'll be sent to the store. You can pay for it, pick it up, and that will show up in your revenue for your royalties. So you can do contests, you can do a lot of things, but it's something that shows incentive. Like Abby, who has this women's romance, she uses her dog Stuntman Mike on Instagram to promote her book, and she's done a lot of fun things to get people to obviously get behind her book and to order it. So it definitely helps get you on a good foundation. Question number 6. If a close friend or relative asks you about whether they should pursue the traditional publishing route at a big house versus self-pubbing, what advice would you give them? My relatives don't write, thankfully. It makes holiday dinners a lot. But I would tell you that I've had many people come around me, and it really does come down to whether or not you want to do all or less of the work. So I personally feel that writing is the hardest thing in the world. I have nothing but profound respect for people who write like yourselves. It is not easy. I find it absolutely frustrating. I would not make it past page 25. And so anytime anyone can write, I think it's pretty awesome. So just imagine if you do self-publish, you have to be in charge of ensuring that you get your editing done. You should not edit your book. You should hire somebody. You're going to need to have someone help you with the book cover design. There's a whole science to book cover design. You think it's easy? I promise you it is not easy. You're going to want to think about distribution, how people will find the book. You also have to think about packaging, types of paper. Are you going to use certain, like, is there going to be 4-color in the book? Are you going to have a certain price point? How are you going to promote the book? How are you going to do all the things that basically a team of people do at a publishing house? Now, there are some amazing places that will help you with packaging and publicity and editing, and it's an a la carte menu, and they're reputable, and they're not vanity publishers, and they basically, you're still self-publishing, but they're going to help you with some of those things that maybe you don't have the skill set for. And so you may be the only one driving the bus if you self-publish it. But if you go through the traditional route, more than likely you're going to have an agent. That's just because the houses prefer to work with the agents a lot. There's just a lot of people with a lot of ideas. It keeps it a little more streamlined, a little bit cleaner. I know that if I can barely keep on top of my queries. I can't even imagine what an editor would go through if they didn't have the policies that agents come to them directly. So in that regard, your agent and you will work with the editor. The editor is going to bring in their team at their publishing house. You're still going to have to do a lot of work, even if you're traditionally published. You're not the only author. So you obviously are going to still have to do a lot of footwork, but things like worrying about the pagination of a manuscript after you've downloaded it into a template and it's not working, this is not your concern. This is production's concern. They get to deal with all of those little weird things that end up, slowing it down. And I feel like it frees up the process so you can focus on talking about your book, interacting with other writers, and also hopefully writing some more books. So it's how you want to divvy up your time. And maybe a more extreme example would be like if you were planning your wedding, which I've done that. It's not fun. And I depended on my friends to help me with that because there were just too many moving pieces. And I think you kind of have to think about, do I really want to enjoy the process of my book coming out, or do I want to feel like some of the stress that comes with like having to make all those decisions too? So think about how you want to spend your time doing that. Let's see. How can an agent help an indie author who is selling well and wants to seek out foreign rights opportunities? What's the best way to approach an agent on this? Ultimately, for foreign rights stuff, an agent is not going to maybe do your foreign rights, to be honest. I know I wouldn't. I'm looking for new ideas. I have in the past started working with authors who were previously published in the traditional way, where like maybe they weren't agented or their agent has passed away, retired, or stepped back from agenting. And there will be some subsidiary rights like foreign rights, audio, TV, movie, that kind of thing. And we'll have a conversation on if they want me to be part of that process. But ultimately, I'm going to be looking for new ideas. I'm going to support my author and help, share with the world if they're doing events around their indie published books. But I'm not going to necessarily focus on those foreign rights unless that, it was one of those weird, fantastic problems where a crap ton of books were sold when you indie published it. This has happened to people. It doesn't happen that often. So I think that's where if you talk to an agent, you'll be like, I've sold 10,000 copies of this book that I published on my own, which is very impressive, by the way. Then, that's a point where an agent like myself might make an exception and be willing to look into possibilities of foreign rights for that title. So let's see. Question 8. If you had a client whose project didn't sell while on submission, would you recommend non-traditional publishing to that client? Actually, that's a pretty normal conversation in the publishing world. So yeah, this is a good question. So sometimes like you'll have an agent, they love your book, they still stand by your book, but you know they've taken it out. So first and foremost, you need to think about how many places you've gone. If this is one of those agents where they only go to 10 places and then they stop, then they didn't really shop the book. There's more than 10 editors out there. There's definitely more than 10 houses. And sometimes if an editor at a house says no, we can go to someone else at that house that is not them and pitch the book to them. So there's definitely still room for movement. You want to think about before you decide I'm going to shelve this, we're not going to go traditional. Once you decide you want to go, like if we feel like, you know, we've shopped it around, no one's biting, do we want to shelve it, or do you want to, you know, self-publish this on your own? This is a good, healthy conversation to have with your agent. So at that point, think about, once again, the time, the money, the energy that you want to put into that. And then obviously gauge if that's something you have the energy for, or if you would just want to like put it aside. I call it putting it under your bed. And then you can just basically focus on a new idea. One of my friends who's a young adult author, a few years ago, he had one book that was on submission with his agent at a publishing house. He already had 2 or 3 other books out by that point. And he had this one book that he loved, and his agent was like, I just don't think I can sell this. And it wasn't young adult. It was just regular fiction. And my friend basically decided he was just going to self-publish it through Kindle and just see what the experience was like. And he was actually just telling me the other day when I saw him that like he's barely sold any copies. He promoted it. He did a reading with it. Like he did all this stuff. And he's like, you know, I think I prefer to go the traditional route, but that was just like for him, that was his experience. But he told me that the reason he did it is he wanted the book in the world so he didn't have to think about it anymore. So he still put a lot of time into the story and the editing, and he thought about the cover design and just wanted to see what it was like to be an indie author. But at the same time, he just said he wanted that out in the world. He didn't feel like it needed to be a big leaning title. He just wanted it in the world so that he could focus on his other stuff. So you kind of have to, once again, go with your gut feeling, your intuition. Do you think you would be okay if you didn't look at the book for a few years and move on from there? So hopefully that's getting there. Does the term non-traditional publishing necessarily mean or equal self-publishing? What is the difference between indie publishing, self-publishing, and a small press publisher? These are great questions. Self-publishing is really like as straight up as like, I wrote a book. I don't have an agent. Maybe I've been trying to find an agent, but I'm just going to do this myself. And you really do take all the steps into place, and it really does. It does mean that at some point you're gonna be the one who makes every single decision along the way. Indie publishing is kind of this close second, and I don't have my presentation from when I teach in front of me right now, but there is a slight difference. But with indie publishing, you're still doing it on your own, but you might be working with a partner here to help you out along the way. Someone reputable. We're not talking vanity. Who's going to help you out with some of those things. So you're still self-publishing, but you're really going with like some assistance with that production or the editorial or all of the above, so that you can make a final product that is readers will enjoy and that is attractive to them, because people do buy books because of the cover. That is a reality. But when you let's see, I'm looking here. And then, of course, you want small press. Your small press publisher is going to hand you a contract, just like a big press publisher or mid-sized. And you're going to have an editor, and they're going to do all the things that the big houses do, except obviously they're going to have their own specific niche audience and reach. The big houses pretty much, are going to be everywhere. They're in the water essentially, but you might have some really great houses that are small presses that are just fantastic, that go really far. I always think about Akashic books. I love Akashic books. And they did the book Go the F to Sleep. And they did one of our author's books, An Unkindness of Ghosts, which is a science fiction fantasy novel by River Solomon. And They are a small press, but they've grown bigger and bigger over time. And they initially were just a small little press, and they put a lot of heart and work into their authors. And then they had that amazing success around the picture book, Go the F to Sleep. And so they basically grew. So they were operating on the same model as a big house, but they started small and organically they grew. And I think that's great. I actually never will discount a mid-sized or a smaller publisher, because they clearly are going to put a lot more attention and heart towards my author. And I'm not one to complain about things like that. So let's see. If someone queries a book pretty heavily and is only getting rejections, should they pursue a non-traditional route or try again with the next one? Would self-publishing the first one hurt them? Okay, so we're going to break this down. We're going to unpack it here. So let's do the first one, rejections. First and foremost, I would encourage all of you guys, if you're looking to be traditionally publishing or querying agents, please, for the love of your patience and your sanity, keep a spreadsheet of who you query and when you queried them and what you sent them. And the reason why is you're going to have a little column called notes on there, and you're going to note if your book was rejected or not. And if it's rejected, what you need to do is say verbatim what that person said and put that on the spreadsheet, cut and paste it out of the email. The reason being is if you save those responses and you're getting nothing but rejections, read them on a day when your head is clear and you haven't been thinking about your book, and see why they're saying no. If they're saying no and it seems really fluffy and generic, you're getting what we call the generic rejection. That means that your query is not standing out to them. It's falling flat. So they aren't really taking the time to give you specific reasons, except that they're just not interested. That would tell you that maybe your pitch needs to be fine-tuned, but also maybe the idea needs to be looked at and see if there's anything that needs to be, around the storyline that needs to be adjusted accordingly. Now, if you are getting all those rejections, but you're coming close, like maybe they're saying specifically there are issues maybe with plotting or transitioning, or maybe the characterization is not working, maybe the world building is not working, whatever that reason is, let's say you keep seeing that pattern emerge in the rejections, what you need to do is actually quit querying the agents, and you need to actually take the time to look at your book and figure out how to approach what might be a possible revise situation where you need to revise your novel, you need to edit it, and then you can redo your pitch. So at that point, it's not time to go self-publishing route unless you want to. It means it's time to fine-tune your ideas some more. If they're giving you lots of commentary as to why they're saying no, and they're saying some things that might be red flags as to why it's not going to get published, that's another time to really reevaluate your book. It's one of the things that we are going to be aware of is we want to make sure we have diverse voices, that we are that people who are being marginalized are represented in books and in the publishing industry. This is a big thing. We're all working hard towards this. So sometimes, like, you will read something and someone has written something with the best of intentions, but it's not good. It might be the kind of book where maybe their intentions are good, but they're going to get doxxed online, and that's not good. So you really have to write what you know, and if you don't know it, you need to do your research. So at that point, if that comes up with your rejections, then maybe it's better just to put the book aside and start anew, or work with a developmental editor if that is what you need to do to have that book. At that point, you're going to want to, if the rejections are just flowing, let's say you've had 100 rejections and you just don't want to query any more people. At that point, you can definitely go the route of self-publishing. And at that point, it's not going to be any damage. Once again, if you're going to self-publish it, you're like my friend who is a published writer. You just want the book in the world. At least do the diligence of providing a final version of your book that is good. Promote your book, and continue to interact with other writers and readers in traditional and non-traditional settings. The reason that way, you know, when you do bring another book in the world, you're going to at least you can say you've been down that route, but you want to go traditional. You've written a new book. And just a side note, if you've written a series and you self-publish it, that's going to be awfully hard for an agent to pick up. So it needs to be like a standalone if you're going to self-publish it. So that was a really long response, so my apologies. I'm going to drink some water because my throat's killing me. Okay. Does the term, let's see. If someone queries a book, no, let's see. Let's moving down, moving to the next one. Can you explain vanity presses for those that may not be familiar? I sure can. Vanity presses, they're finally getting their day. They're finally, these are guys where they'll say, you have a great book. They might even try to imitate a small press and tell you that you have a great book, and that they can publish it if you give them X amount of money. So what this means is that what you're really doing is self-publishing, but you're giving them all the money, and you're going to have a garage full of books. So what they'll do is they'll say, you know, we want to work with you on this book. So if you pay us $5,000, we can do, you know, this level of support in getting your book out. And they'll make these big promises like editing and cover design and things like that. And then what happens is when you see the final product, usually it's pretty scary looking. They usually use some, I always laugh because they always have Times New Roman font on the covers, which should not be on book covers as far as I'm concerned. They'll use some cheeseball images. Even the final version of the book will have lots of errors and just lots of things. And basically you've paid them all this money. And then as soon as you pay them the money, they either disappear or what they give you is such low quality, even give the book away if you tried. I once met someone at the San Diego State University Writers Conference a few years ago. We became fast friends, but she self-published her book, and I ran into her in all places a few years later in New York. We both were in New York at the same time, and it was really weird to run into her on the other side of the country, but she had moved there, and she basically said that she still had all those books from when she self-published her book, and that she would never do it again. And some of these folks, these vanity publishers, once again, I don't have my presentation in front of me. I should have printed it off. But there's going to be red flags about them. I know that Absolute Right will talk about them a lot. But basically, talk to your fellow writers and your friends. Do your research. You should, you know, unless you're intentionally self-publishing your book, you shouldn't be paying all that money up front. If they're coming under the guise of being an actual publisher. So it's usually lots of red flags. Look at their website, look at what they've done. You'll see what I mean. The quality is really low. Let's see. Okay. Several indies have told people to go. Indies solely because of the contract copyright issues that have popped up in traditional publishing. What are your thoughts on keeping the rights to your work and possibly losing it forever if you publish with the Big Five, for example? Okay, I'm very confused here. So we'll start with the first question. So I don't know what you mean by contract copyright issues. So I'm going to need a little bit more here. I need some specs here. Give me some specifics. But what are the thoughts on keeping the rights to your work and possibly losing it forever if you publish with the Big Five, for example? Well, you're not going to lose the rights forever, so I'm going to disagree with you on that. If you have an agent and you're with a Big Five house or any other publishing house, an agent is going to work hard to retain as many rights as they possibly can. At our agency, we will actively request a TV, movie, dramatic performance, audio. I actually keep merchandising rights. Sometimes I'll fight to keep the graphic novel rights. I'm going to keep as many rights as I possibly can within reason. But when it comes to the book in whatever format it may be, whether it's ebook, print, or, you know, they always come up with these various other ways that book can be book. If you see a contract, that's going to go with the publisher. So when we sell a book, we're going to say, these are the rights that we're retaining, and you can have these. We all have to come to a middle ground, obviously, when we do that. This is part of the negotiation process, but they don't get to keep them forever necessarily. Sometimes publishers will have an out-of-print clause, which I'm actually fine with these. I like them. So it'll say that if a certain number of copies haven't been sold in a certain period of time, then basically within the author or the author's agent can put something in writing requesting that the rights are reverted, and then there will be a designated time range by which the publisher has to respond. Basically, this is because people can't find the book anywhere. It's not available. This will happen usually with print books, not ebooks. So if the publisher does not make the book available in the format, i.e. print, after that certain period of time, then the rights would be reverted. So it's not that they can keep them forever. And obviously, like even with movie options, like right now we're dealing with a few shopping deals for some of our authors. This is where a book is being shopped by a person who is a film agent for us. And basically they have a designated period of time to shop that book where it would be translated into the big screen or the TV. So they don't get to keep them forever. Obviously, even when a book is optioned, it finally gets picked up by a production company. They only have it for so long. So a great example is the book A Confederacy of Dunces has been optioned so many times. It's kind of a quiet joke. It's never going to be a film, but it's been owned by a lot of interesting people, including John Candy along the way. So, you know, that means that whoever's receiving that money, I assume it's the estate, it just every time it gets re-optioned, there's some more money. So that's how it goes. So I didn't see, I still don't know what the copyright issues contracts, so we can return. If you want to throw that in later and I can get to it, that sounds fine. Is a small press publisher still considered traditional if there are no fees or charges of any kind to the author? Yes, it is. So, for example, we have many relationships with small, medium, and large publishers. So, like we work with Grey Wolf, and they're a smaller press, but they win all the awards. So, yeah, so traditional contract. There is the, you know, the biannual royalty statements. There's all the stuff that we anticipate with the large house we get with them as well. So yes, we do have those contracts just like that, like you do with the big house. Are many of your clients hybrid authors? How do you and your clients decide which publishing method is best for each book? It's basically, it's not some of our authors are and some of them aren't. I mean, I feel like when you have an agent, as we were saying yesterday on the panel I was on, you got to talk to each other. Sometimes people are going to write a book and they got to be in their bonnet. They want to write that book. And, you know, the agent will say, there's no way to sell this in the current market right now. And you'll have that conversation like, do you want to sit on it or do you want to come back to it later? And I think it's one of those things when you're hybrid, you're having what I call healthy conversations. Like, I'm going to do this on my own, but I would like you to take this out. And having those conversations is a recipe for a really fantastic working relationship with your agent. Obviously, we're going to decide if it's going to be a good book, if I feel like it's well written, if it's a good idea, if it's something that will, I feel, take feet in the marketplace. But if it's something that's not going to take feet, then that's my job to at least communicate that I feel like it's not going to go very far. I just had this conversation the other day with one of our folks. We have a client with a deep list of titles. This person used to be represented by another agent, and now we're their agency. And they have written a picture book, but they've used some terminology that it's very old-fashioned. And I mean, we agreed that it needs a big, big edit. because there's no way with the verbiage that today's child is going to understand some of the allusions that are hinted in the story. And so it's just, it would have sold 10 years ago, but not now. So having those kind of conversations, in that case, like, I don't think we need to self-publish it. I personally think we need to just sit down and do a really, really deep edit. And it's going to take a little while to get the old-fashioned language out so that today's child will connect with the storyline. Obviously, if this person said, you know, this is the book I want to write, then we would provide support on this end and helping them, like, guide them along the way on what needs to be done so that a good product comes out of it if they self-publish. Let's see. What influence does genre have on the method of publishing that's best for a book? That's a good question. So I always laugh. Ebooks, Wattpad, all that stuff. You definitely see a lot of genre and fan fiction on Wattpad and also on all the other places where people are sharing their stories. Erotica definitely feels like it has like its own, it's just like, it's usually one of the most heavily used categories in self-publishing, especially people are like doing it electronically. Same with romance. You'll see a lot with science fiction, fantasy. And I think it's just because, I don't know, this is just a random like ramble here, but in the old days, like, they would do serial stories. So Edgar Allan Poe would tell a story over a, you know, like it would be published in pieces versus as a whole story. So I think it goes back to the roots of telling these stories, maybe not all at one time, just how they package them for magazines and whatnot. But I do think that genre does make a big deal. So like, you know, romance, that is a category that is just busy. It is always busy, and you know, it's always going to sell. And erotica is always going to sell. I think the big joke is like cats and erotica. There's like all kinds of things on the internet, but cats and erotica, people seem to love that stuff. So you have to think about, obviously, if you're going to write within a category, you know, it's once again the quality of the writing comes down to play. Obviously, how you interact with other writers. I have to say, with the kidlit community and science fiction and fantasy, these categories, everyone really does interact with each other a lot online. I always laugh. My nonfiction authors for just like regular adult books, they don't have that kind of unity within their category like you do with kidlit and genre fiction. So obviously, once again, as I keep saying, write the best book you can. And if you want to be one of those folks who puts your stories out there on Wattpad, or you're going to self-publish it through Kindle with their you know, with the Amazon Create Space, you can do that. And that's fine. People will buy it. It's a lot of people read genres on their phones. I see it at the airport whenever I travel. And so I do think, like, it's kind of like at the airport, you see nothing but beach reads and quick reads, and genre is always heavy. It's heavy on the genre at the airport bookstores. And the same goes for like what people are going to read when, you know, when they're self-publishing these things. It's all, usually it's more electronic based than like print. So hopefully that helped. Let's see. As an older writer of children's fiction, 7 years old, querying and trying the traditional method, should I give self-publishing a try after I say a year, since I don't have the time that younger authors may have? Does age factor into it? Well, one, we don't care how old or young you are. Obviously, I would be more concerned if I'm working with a 12-year-old, because I would need to talk to their parents, and that does come up sometimes. I don't have any 12-year-old authors myself, thank God. But at the same time, I would say that you have to go with what's important to you. I think being in your 70 years old, you're still young. My family lives to almost 100. So our family, we never die. We literally live to like usually 95 to 100 years old in our family. You still got a lot of time Traditionally querying, if that's what you want to be through a traditional house, then you need to write the best. Once again, you got to write the best book you can. It needs to be, you need beta readers. You need to make sure it's edited, that it's a good story, that you know your readership. And if you want to be traditionally published, 1 or 2 years is not the end of the world. It's not going to, you know, I think personally be an issue, but obviously, if you feel that you don't want to wait that time, then you're going to need to go, and you're going to go the self-publishing route, then you need to make sure that you're very intentional and strategic with every step and every decision you make when you self-publish your book. To me, age is not a big deal. It's even Tommy Ungerer, he passed away yesterday. He wrote Crichter, and I love him. He was 87. That man was still producing books. So I definitely think, you, once again, focus on your writing and telling a good story. Would a traditional publisher ever offer no advance? Yeah, that might happen. Yeah. So some publishers will offer no advance, but they'll do a higher royalty situation. So instead of getting, you know, maybe 15% of the hardcover sales or the paperback sales, you'll get 20 or 25% or whatever they're offering on paper. In that case, in that situation, it might be a small press. They don't have a huge advance that they can give, but you're going to get paid faster. So based on when statements are issued. So most publishers issue statements twice a year. Romance publishers, they love to keep me busy, so they issue statements every single month. So it keeps a little bit crazier on this end. So every month I'm dealing with money coming in. Some publishers will do quarterly statements. So what happens, just so you know, we're going to refer back to that advance you guys asked about earlier. Let's say you were the author who got that $50,000 advance. Your book comes out 2 years later. You've not gotten any money since your book was published. So now you will not get paid again until you earn out that $50,000. Let's say that your book sells at $15 a pop, and you get 10% of every retail price. 10% of every sale goes towards earning back that advance. This is if the person who bought the book, that would be the bookstore or Amazon, paid the publisher and or distributor for those sales. So at that point, you're looking at $1.50 of every book sale would go towards earning back your $50,000 advance. So once you earn that $50,000 advance, you get money again. So one of my first book deals when I was a young agent was with the bonus, it was almost $100,000. And I can tell you that person has never earned out their advance since then. They still have a ways to go. And so that means that they got all the money up front, but they didn't get anything afterwards. Now, if a publisher offers a smaller advance, but then you're getting royalties anyways, that means you'll earn out your advance faster. So, you know, if this person that got the $100,000 advance would have gotten something at least, you know, half, she probably would have started getting royalties even a few years ago. But, you know, at this point, we just assume she's never going to earn it out, this is what happens sometimes with these big advances. But if you have a house with no advance or a smaller advance and they're giving you $1.50 per $15 book, you'll sell less copies, but you're going to earn it out faster. And then you can hopefully have a little more of a general stream of income if people are buying your book. Obviously, it's like the bell curve, like it'll peak and it'll go back down, but sometimes it peaks back up depending on if people are talking about a book at the time. So the big thing is understanding the price of your book, how much you get per book, and if you do have an advance, how many books you need to sell before you earn out that advance, and then you can at least anticipate getting paid or getting something once every 6 months, or depending on when you those royalty statements are sent to your agent. So there's a lot of math there. My apologies. Okay. How much is it on the author to promote and sell their book? Do publishers set up author events, or does the author take care of scheduling these? Very good. So you're going to be assigned someone at a publishing house who is your publicity person. but you're going to be one of many authors that they're working with. Now, once again, unless your name is James Patterson, you're not going to get all the attention necessarily. So when you get published, you actually fill out what we call lovingly the AQ. And the AQ is, in our lingo, the author questionnaire. So at our agency, we actually prepare a book proposal before we take something out. And it'll have, we'll discuss books of similar nature. We'll discuss some great ways the book can be promoted. This is not that you're promising to do those things, but like outlets where you think that they should, somehow your book should be mentioned or reviewed or highlighted. So like, for example, if you wanted your book to be highlighted on NPR, then you would note that in your book proposal, even if you don't have any connection to NPR. So that's just using an example. You would talk about people who would read your book. So it's not just kids, but maybe kids who like specific types of books, maybe the teachers in their lives, the librarians. Maybe it's one of those books that's super cute. That would be a gift title. So like Dr. Seuss is constantly someone who like is a gift title, but also kids read it in the classroom and the librarians buy it. So parents buy it. So thinking about who the audience is, who's going to be voting with their time, their energy, and their dollars for that book. So we do that. That's our book proposal. We work on that before we take out the book. Now, when the author questionnaire comes in, the AQ, it's going to ask you all of those questions that we've already researched on our end and some more. So it'll say, what are some magazines that should look at our book? What are some places, or who are some people who could review the book and provide a blurb? What are some bookstores that you would like to visit? What are some bookstores we can send a copy to? Now, they're not promising they're going to do any of this, but what you're doing is you're giving the marketing and publicity people a chance to see that you can think outside the box and you know how to get your book in front of readers. The thing about publishing is that, and this is, it takes the lead of advertising, of which my best friend works in advertising, is that she once told me people need to see something 7 to 11 times before they actually take action and do it. So what are 7 to 11 ways that you can get in front of readers and talk to them about your book? And it needs to be different. It can't be all the same way. So obviously that 7 to 11 times is where the publicity comes in. It comes through that AQ you've turned in. It's something that will give them a little bit of an idea on how to promote and market your book, and also hopefully seed some ideas for yourself. So let's say that you're going to Florida, you're taking your family to Disney. Well, how about you reach out to a bookstore there and see about signing some copies of your book and doing an event? Are you going to a writers conference, an SCBWI event? Well, maybe you could do a dual reading. You know, you and another writer buddy up and you do a reading at a local bookstore. These kinds of things that you do will help build, make your stars shine a little bit brighter, also build your network and your reach, and also just have a great working relationship with bookstores and writers in your field. So it's something that you have to depend on them to do a little bit, but you're going to have to do a lot of work yourself, because when the new season rolls in, they're going to probably kind of put you to the side. They're going to focus on the next batch of books coming out. So the more you can, think ahead of time, the better. You do want to schedule some of your own events, but there's nothing wrong with running that through the publicity person too. And obviously, just really think about ways that you can get in front of readers in what I would call proactive way, whether it's a school visit or whatnot. So that was kind of rambly, but hopefully that hits the note. Last question. Okay. And this is last question. Okay. Under what circumstances would you advise an author to seek out small presses to publication rather than big? Once again, you need to look at what they've done. So it's just like researching agents. Look at what they're looking for in their submission list. Look at their previous sales. If they're a newer agent, look at the sales that their agency has done at least. Obviously, look at the background of that agent. If they're newer, they might be a new agent, but maybe they were an editor, or maybe they worked in publishing in some other scope. So obviously, that's when you're doing the agent research. With the small presses, look at their titles. Have they gotten some recognition? What is the quality of the book that they've provided to the world to look at? You can look at these at the bookstore. You can look at them at the library. go look at them. There's something to be said for small press that makes a beautiful book. And a great example is Grey Wolf. So they're never going to be Random House, and they don't want to be Random House, but they make a great book. So you have to think about what they're publishing and if it lines up to what your book is like. And there's nothing wrong with that if it's a fair contract and if you feel like they get your book, you're going to get the attention that your book deserves. So hopefully that helps. I think I'm getting the note that are we good? Because I think it's 2:55. Am I supposed to wrap this up? I have no idea. Okay. Well, thank you guys. It was really nice to meet you. I hope I didn't ramble too bad. So thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'll maybe see some of you guys in a few hours. So thank you so much.